Two, one. What's up, Barry?
How you doing, Cole?
I'm
Thanks
well,
for having
man.
me, man.
Absolutely. We discussed this multiple times. I'm glad we finally made it work. You were a backup.
Yeah, I'm everybody's backup.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know, if you're a backup, it might be a little offensive, but when you're everybody's backup, you got to take a little pride in that.
I think my wife's even said I'm her backup, but sometimes you just got to settle.
Which is why you're married now. She was your backup.
That's right. It paid off. Bide my time.
Very good. I want to start. This is a NFL Hall of Famer, rushing title leader in the NFL, Barry Sanders, with us on the episode. Wait.
You do know you have video to go with this.
They're seeing.
They're going to say, "Whoa, he's let himself go."
I'm just confusing. I'm confusing the audio only folks.
Oh my, gee! You stop 2-a-days and look what happens to you.
Well, let me back up. We have Barry Sanders with us today.
And I'd like to point out, I'm the Barry Sanders because I'm 6 months older than that guy.
Nice. That's pretty cool, at least the age-wise.
Historically, I've made a career in advertising and selling ads in the Dallas-Fort Worth market.
Yeah.
And when I first started selling advertising, I would go through the gatekeepers and call and Barry Sanders, and they'd write down your name. Well, 6 months later, he wins the Heisman Trophy for Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Oh, you mean like the football player?" I was like, "Yeah, that's not actually who's coming out. But yeah, whatever you have to do to remember my name, go for it." And imagine sometime later when I'd show up and they'd be woefully disappointed that
Sure,
I'm not the athletic Detroit Lions football player, but me.
Do you think you did better because?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's about building a brand. You know that. It's about contacts and building a brand and being memorable.
Yeah.
Whatever you do, that's just a general life credence,
My middle name's Austin. And
right.
So Austin Insurance, and people either think my first name is Austin, or they think there's an affiliate to the capital of the Texas.
Right, that it's something to do with the capital of Texas.
It's just using my name on my business, so I can understand and respect rolling with what you got.
I've been professionally Barry Sanders for 30 years. Yeah. And, it was odd being at a Dallas Cowboy game back in the 90s on a Monday night game when they're playing the Detroit Lions.
Oh, wow.
And there's 64,000 people screaming, "Kill Barry Sanders." It's a little unnerving. But I got over it. It's helped. I actually was in a room with another fellow named Jerry Jones and a guy named Jimmy Johnson.
Yeah. So Barry,
none of us were who you thought. Yeah. I've been on sales appointments where I walk in and you look, and underneath the desk they've got some footballs.
Yeah. We sign these.
And you see the disappointment when I walk in the door and you see the foot just push the bag under, like, you thought I was somebody else, didn't you?
That's great, man.
And it's like, that's okay. I don't care what mnemonic, what trigger you remember my name. In fact, I have a client just emailed me this morning that she's like, "Okay, yours is an easy name to remember because I'm a Detroit fan." And I'm like, "Great.
Hey,
just fill out the insertion order. We're good."
Yeah,
I'm happy for whatever you need to do to remember me and think of me.
Yeah. Hey, real quick then, just I don't mind at all. You want to give 30 seconds on what you do there?
Well, I've been in the ad solutions business in this market for 30 years. I started at a little pizza place on Northwest 19th Street called Super Pizza.
Oh, yeah.
It was one of my first jobs. My first job was as a costume character at Six Flags Over Texas for a shy little flower like me. And but I started when I was 18 and was a costume character, went over to a place called Super Pizza at a time when Domino's was expanding in huge. And I remember the three guys that started it up featured Grand Prairie style pizza.
Yeah.
Which meant nothing. It just was the type of pizza they made.
Yeah.
And it was kind of funny because one by one they bailed out of the business. So at 19, I'm the GM of this pizza place. Yeah. They're on 19th Street, which is now 161, just north of I-30. And the part of the job that I enjoyed the most was placing the ads, putting flyers out, doing a billboard, doing different stuff, and seeing how that impacted the business.
Sure.
So I somehow parlayed that into working in advertising, and You know, when I got my first job in advertising, I was working for the Green Sheet. The
Green
Green Sheet brings you buyers.
Hey,
If you tell people you work for the Green Sheet, they offer to buy lunch.
Really?
Because they assume you're running ads for somebody trying to get rid of a couch, something like that.
Yeah.
They really do pay a salary. It's okay. But, you know, I worked that and figured, hey, they pay me X amount a day. If I can make it through the week before they figure out I'm a fraud,
Yeah.
ka-ching. A couple months later, I'm the senior sales guy there. And it
Nice.
just, and I
Good job, Barry.
went to the newspapers. I had a career with the Morning News, had a career with the Star Telegram. Those have changed. In the
Yeah.
last 10 years, I've done Valpak, the little blue coupon solution envelope. That's,
Yeah.
people know what it is. There's coupons in the envelope. They get it in the mail. And it just fundamentally, people know
Valpak.
and respond. So that's what I do. That's not why I'm here.
Sure, yeah, that's why.
But, you know,
I'll give you
I would be
the opportunity.
remiss to not respond to a microphone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, so we started, before we came up, started recording, Axel and I went over to Barry's house, and Barry showed us his game room, his arcade room. Barry has multiple arcade games, pinball machines. I was really floored by what I saw, and Barry's interest in that as well. Tell me a little bit about how that came about and what you got over there.
Well, quick backstory. I was into another hobby, and I had a bad motorcycle accident in 2008.
Okay, so you're cruising motorcycles,
You know,
living the life,
I was a biker for 6 weeks.
selling ads.
I
6 weeks?
was 6 weeks. I bought a motor. My wife gave me 3 rules. She said, "Look, you're gonna do what you're gonna do. You're 42. 3 rules. We have 3 children. Promise me you'll always wear a helmet. Concrete's hard."
Yeah.
I said, "Okay." She said, "Promise me you'll go over to UTA and spend the 2 days taking the class and learning, even though they put a big guy like me on a 100cc motorcycle and
I did that.
learn to go over a piece of wood so that you at least know what you're doing, how to turn left, right." Deal. 3rd rule, please buy your first bike for cash.
Nice.
Don't go finance a $28,000 Harley only to find out it's too cold, it's raining, it's too hot. I don't like it. I don't want it. And I'm
Yeah.
still making a payment each and every month.
I financed the bike.
And so you stare at it in the garage when the weather's bad and you can't
Yeah.
use it. You're like, okay, I'll still get to make the payments.
Yeah.
And like I say, I was a biker for 6 weeks. I got it in April, Memorial Day of 2008. My stepfather, the guy who sold me the bike, my brother-in-law, we all went on a ride on Memorial Day, Monday, and we rode down around south through Ellis County and out to Granbury. And we're coming back, almost back home. We're over in South Fort Worth area. I'm a full-figured fella. I take blood pressure pills to keep my blood pressure under control. Well, for whatever reason that day, my blood pressure dropped out.
Oh, wow.
And it was 50/30.
Oh.
So practically no blood pressure.
Yeah.
And I went to sleep at 60 miles an hour.
Oh, no way.
And it doesn't really matter how good you do in those classes.
Yeah, if you're asleep.
It's hard to ride a bike at 60 miles an hour when you're asleep. And I actually rolled into the accelerator and leaned left. And at 70 miles an hour, hit the concrete wall dividing east and west.
Oh, man.
Woke up in the street, faces hot and banged up, and scratched all the pieces, broken bones. And the first thought I had is, oh my goodness, I am in trouble. I hurt my wife.
Yeah.
Because that was the second time my lovely bride had gone riding with me on the motorcycle.
Yeah.
And so I immediately tried to crawl to her. My legs are mangled and face is torn up. And I went, and she wasn't moving, wasn't making sounds. And when somebody ran over and grabbed her and she screamed, at least I knew she was breathing.
Yeah. Whew.
And it was a trying time, but it really brought us together. It was a time for us to focus on us. I didn't walk for a year.
Yeah.
I had a shattered leg. I got around on a scooter. We talked earlier about going to the baseball games on my three-wheel scooter. But it was a time for us to focus on what's important. It was funny, where both of her arms were broken. My leg's broken.
Are you kidding me?
So we were like a Racer X Speed Racer combo. We had to have the best of each to be able to, keep the family going. It makes you focus. It makes you focus on what's important. I wound up working for a guy that was my old boss before, and he says, you've mellowed a lot. And in my business, if I got something wrong, I got the phone number wrong on the ad, or the colors are wrong, the expiration date. And that's fine. We can fix that. It cost me a few dollars. I was in the ICU for 3 weeks, and when those nurses have a bad day, somebody doesn't go home. So in the big picture, I don't have a bad day.
Sure.
But then there's people that, I kind of look at it as nobody's ever drowned just by falling in the water.
Yeah.
They drown by staying there.
Yeah.
Everybody, all of us falling. It's not what you see on Facebook and Instagram and online. The real life that we go through, you have adversities, you have challenges. And if that happens, that's okay.
Yeah.
What do you do with it? You get out of the pool or you learn to swim.
Yep.
The only people that ever drown are the people who go, oh, can you believe this happened to me?
Yeah.
We've all had family members pass or lost a job or had a relationship end or some kind of thing. And if that's what defines you and that's what you hang up on for the rest of your life, it's just odd. Why bother?
It's amazing that you can the mind allows you to get stuck in that situation. I mean, people, like you said, people have tragic events all the time, and it's at those times you define who you are and where you're going to go in life. And man, when some folks just dig themselves and listen, it's a tragic event, and they deserve help, they deserve kindness, whatever it deserves, but it's up to them ultimately to move on or grow from that situation.
So what's next?
Yeah, what's next?
What's next? I mean, we've all faced these challenges, and the people that really suffer, the people, well, since I lost that job, I've just never been able to get back to where, and that's really the message I took from this. It kind of mellowed me a little bit. I'm still an extrovert, still silly, everything's a joke, but quite frankly, nothing is so serious that, I sell coupons for a living.
Coupons.
It's nice. I help people build their business, but the ICU nurses, what they do is what the first responders, the people that helped load me into the ambulance,
life.
They made a difference. And I really, at some point, it's been 11 years, I want to go find the guys that were working that shift.
Yeah.
And tell them, hey, there's a movie, Saving Private Ryan, where he says, earn this.
Earn this.
At the end, after all the people, it's like, you got to earn this.
He whispers in his ear, right?
Yeah, because technically I was 50 over 30, and the ambulance drivers were talking to each other and said, do we go? And he goes, no, we may need to call it.
Wow.
They figured I was dead in the street. And so everything else is a bonus. Everything else is a gift after that. So clearly after that point, it was only the second time my lovely bride rode the motorcycle, and I'm 3 times her size, so she's not much of a co-pilot when the pilot's asleep. So we decided, okay, no more motorcycles. Find another hobby.
Had your fun, or lack thereof.
And I'm a child of the 70s, early 80s. Growing up here, in this market, it's when when Pac-Man and all of these games were formative major things in your life. You went to the arcade, and the video revolution. I had an Atari 2600 in 1978, and I've looked historically. Those things, when they were new, sold for $299. Now, in $1978, that was a lot of money.
Yeah.
My parents spent. You look now, and an Xbox One or a, the new generation games are $300 or $400. Those things were $299. So, they were buying new cars for $5,000.
Yeah.
So that, parents, I was blessed that, I was growing up here in Grand Prairie, and all of my education here, and made a lot of good friends, some of which you work with, and, have had lifelong relationships. But we got into hobbies, and I remember that my folks closed in the garage at our house in South Grand Prairie way back. My folks had an interesting strategy. They wanted their house to be the playhouse.
Yeah.
Where I would bring my friends. And I realized the strategy later. Didn't realize it back then. But I'd always have the parties. We had a pool. Yeah. We had the closed-in garage, had a pool table, air hockey table, pinball machine.
Yeah.
And all my friends would come over for parties. Well, as you get older, as a teen, and you start going out, and you mention, I'm going to go out and hang out with such and such. My mom would say, oh, I've never met such and such. Well, such and such is not much with parents, and probably is into some sketchy stuff. Yeah, I don't think you need to hang out with him. So it was an interesting strategy, and it's funny, you gentlemen were at my house, and you saw I kind of built the same strategy around my house. It's a playhouse. My kids don't care.
Yeah.
But you have the point of interest. I know my children's friends. I get to know them and find out the things they're into, and it's a way you can be involved in
So at this point, today, your kids are grown, right?
My youngest graduates college in May.
Okay. Wow.
And my oldest was married 2 years ago. She's 33 and lives in Gainesville. And my son was in the U.S. Navy, and he's in Illinois now.
No way.
In fact, I have a arcade now, so this gets us to where I got into the pinball hobby, which you asked. Go ahead.
If you don't mind. Let me go back 10 years when you had your accident.
Mm-hmm.
So you got one that's just out of college.
I had a 10-year-old, a 16-year-old, and a 21-year-old, and they brought him into the hospital at John Peter Smith to say goodbye that night.
Man.
And that is a sobering moment when the kids come in, and it never occurred to me that I would get seriously hurt. It never occurred to me because I wasn't going to hot rod. I'm not going to zoom around on this bike. I wanted to smoke a cigar and look cool and wear my shorty helmet and just putter around at 55, 60 miles an hour. So the worst I ever thought that might happen was, okay, maybe I missed the kickstand and this thing falls over and I break the mirror off.
Yeah.
But I'm not popping wheelies and racing down the road or any of this stuff. And stuff happens. They're called accidents for a reason. They're not on purpose.
Right.
These things happen when you don't plan them, and they surprise. In my case, it wasn't another vehicle.
Yeah.
It was a health issue for me, and it just was devastating, and it took us out of commission. We're blessed that the community was so nice to us.
Good.
We're blessed that we had some health insurance to get through, because it's extraordinary. I think my wife and I's total bills for that incident was over $500,000.
Golly.
And frankly, you never ask how much medical care is when you're at a level 1 trauma center.
No.
Because if you need it, you need it.
Yeah, there's no if.
Just get it for me and we'll worry about the bill later.
Yeah.
I've been the guy. In fact, years later, I talked to an ambulance provider and he goes, "Did we transport you?" And I said, I got to be honest. As that guy who's laying on the highway, bleeding out, I'm not brand shopping. I don't care who comes. Send me a box with the lights on it. Take me to the hospital. Get me help. Yeah. And trust me, at that point, I'm no longer boutique shopping for who's going to transport.
Excuse me, could you drop me off?
Yeah,
My friend's going to pick
I've
me
got
up.
an Uber coming, if you don't mind. Yeah. So, it was a very, very interesting, it was a life-changing moment. We moved, and we lived in Houston for 4 or 5 years. And...
Oh, after the accident?
After the accident. And it, like I say, after a year of kind of growing together and figuring out how with no legs and no arms, we can still cook the kids' casserole. But they brought them in. My daughter was 10. My son was 16, and my oldest daughter was 21. So, yeah, traumatic time to see them devastated with, hey, look, both of them were wiped out in an accident. And you got to deal with it. But you know what? That's not what defines you.
No.
Yeah, I don't move as good as I used to, but frankly, I was not the running back Barry Sanders to begin with, so it's okay.
Before or after?
I couldn't sing, I couldn't dance before, so we're even. And
nice.
That's basically, it's just the philosophy of how bad does it really get? It's okay. We can fix it. And I don't want to be one of those people that, since I lost the job at the mill.
I'm glad we get to share that. Unfortunately, a lot of folks, it takes that to define.
An eye-opener.
Yeah. So I encourage preaching that as much as possible so that people don't have to experience that tragic situation to live that way or understand that.
Well, we all know people that have gone through a divorce, lost a job, lost a loved one. It happens to all of us.
Yeah.
What's next?
Right.
Yes, I don't wish this on anybody. I lost family members recently, and everybody always says the same thing.
Sorry for
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
Well, you didn't know my mother, but yes, you're sorry because I'm going through it.
Yeah.
You're compassionate.
Yeah.
But I kind of understand without you saying you're sorry, because unless you're a really bad person, of course you hate that I would have to go through that if you have any kind of compassion at all. The second thing people always say is, if there's anything I can do, let me know. Yeah. And so I've taken to, what's one thing I can do to lighten the load on your plate today?
Yeah, the question.
And when people go through that, ask for one thing, what's one thing I can do to help you out?
Yeah.
And it may be as simple as, we need pizza for all these people today at the house.
Yeah.
Got it taken care of. I'll go get pizza. We need garbage bags.
Yeah.
Because there's nobody. Take that, because it's so overwhelming, and when these things happen and you go through it, it's like, I don't know. Well, if there's anything you do, and people just almost dismiss it it's like the people that, there was a fella in town used to, talk about a pass the salt thanks
Yeah.
versus a genuine thank you.
Yeah.
You know, the thanks you give to somebody when they hand you the salt versus a heartfelt thank you. I appreciate what you do.
Well, and so what it, I study that a lot. I think about that a lot. Proper etiquette, and I don't mean just etiquette. I mean, so I feel as if I'm a very genuine person. I hate I don't say hi and bye all the time to people. I see you're there.
Mm-hmm.
You saw I'm here. I don't have to come over and say hi to you.
And check it off the list.
Right. That's
Oh.
just a formal thing that people do. Same thing with leaving. Look, I'm going to see you again. Now, I don't want to go through the process of maybe I'll never see you again.
Yeah.
It's good to say your goodbyes. I respect and understand that. But I've never been good at that. And people sometimes think that's weird, and I'm okay with that. But I often just say, I'll see you again, and we'll probably be one-on-one. I get to talk with you, right? I don't have to come over, interrupt what you're doing, interrupt what I'm doing.
I just want to say goodbye.
Yeah, see ya.
Oh, of course. And
And-
I'll
and-
see you tomorrow at the next event we go to.
Right, and then so when the church events happen, my goal, I want to be the continuation of life. I want to be, okay, you said, I'm not going to sit there and be sad with you.
Right.
Now, maybe if it's a close loved one, there's a different story, but like if it's an acquaintance, I want to be, hey, let's go to the game. Hey, make a joke, whatever it is to continue. Life goes on, dude. Like, I know it's a tragic loss. You lost your grandmother and you need to be sad. And I'm not preaching this when I'm saying this, but I'm saying the approach is, what's next? Let's go do something. Well, yes, we're going to remember your loved one, but let's continue. That your loved one wants us to continue living this life.
In that vein, without, I know we want to talk about the entertaining and fun stuff, and
I
we'll
know,
get
but
there.
yeah.
I promise we'll get there. But, my oldest, it's your first child. You don't know what to expect. At 8 months, she got a form of cancer called Wilms tumor
Wow.
that forms in your kidney. This was the early 80s. I'm 21 years old, and my daughter has cancer, and we're at Children's Medical Center. And my mom's an OR trauma nurse.
Yeah.
My mom's nursing manuals and textbooks when she was in school back in the 60s. Wilms tumor was 100% fatal.
Yeah.
There was only 500 cases a year. Fortunately, by the 80s, they come with some treatments, but I'm a joker. I go for the punchline on a lot of stuff. Sometimes people get annoyed with that, but I usually look for the happy and the playful side. So when I have an 8-month-old I've got her in Children's Medical Center and I'm playing with her, the doctors are coming in and talking about all the serious stuff, and I'm being jokey and playful with my 8-month-old daughter. And my mom pulled me aside and said, "The doctors want to know that you get this. Do you understand?" And I said, "Yeah, we're in a very serious place where some people are facing some serious stuff, and this little boy may not go home, and this may not happen. However, if my 8-month-old daughter sees daddy sad and crying, that's out of the norm.
Mental.
That's not what she needs to see. She needs to see daddy's playful like he always has been."
Yeah.
And my mom looked at me and said, "You get it.
Yeah.
You get the magnitude of what we're dealing with, but it will do." I said, "Mom, I'm not a specialist or a surgeon. That's not what I do. We'll pay these guys.
Yeah.
They can take care of that. I'm going to make jokes and play horsey on my knee with
Yeah.
my 8-month-old and deal with what we got to do." And that's kind of what you're saying with,
Right.
look,
No, that's exactly what I mean.
it sucks that you go through this stuff. We all go through this stuff.
Yeah.
And I certainly feel for you. But what's next? And let's if somebody passes, what do you remember the positive of them?
Yeah.
Let's talk about some fun stuff.
I don't want it to be a mistake, like you said, of
Right.
denial.
Right.
I don't want you to think I'm denying what's happening.
Right.
I've accepted what's happened, and I want to make it better.
Right.
I want to, and that
It's part of the healing.
right. And what that means is continuing your life,
Yeah.
making your life go
You know.
on by playing with them, by making that
Right.
joke.
If the marriage ended, it didn't mean your life ended. Things change. Jobs end. We'll have other. We can still be friends with the friends we had at the old job.
My best friend's mother passed away last year, closest friend. And it was by about 3 or 4 months after, and I was sitting at his house hanging out. We were about to go catch a concert or something. I says, "Hey, so is it too early for your mom jokes?" And he looked at me and goes, You can see he was like thinking about it. He didn't answer, you know. And so what? I want it to be okay, and I don't want it, but I don't. So at that point, I'm respecting. He's my very close
Right.
friend, and so I have to be careful about that because I want your life to go on and realize your mom is better. And when every time I make a your mom joke, that's honoring your mother, in my opinion.
I
right?
understand.
And so it's just you got to be careful.
My children, I've raised them with a sense of humor, and so they now are just as funny as I am with punchlines about stuff. Tragically, my first wife passed away about 5 years ago. I've been divorced for 20 years and feel like I have a pretty good alibi. But she passed away, but it's the mother of my oldest two children.
Wow.
And I loved her. I don't want to live with her. I was divorced from her for 20 years, but it's tragic that she passes. And it's hard to tell your children, hey, their mom passed.
Yeah.
They immediately came up with, because there's a thing in our family of you never get to see them again. I said, you know what? You can see them anytime you want. Just close your eyes.
Oh, that's awesome.
And picture them.
Yeah.
And they say, yeah, but I can't ever talk to them. I said, no, you can talk to them anytime you want.
Yeah.
Just talk to them. They'll hear you.
Yeah.
May not come back and same kind of conversation, but they'll hear you. And my daughter, without missing a beat, says, yeah, they got pretty good reception down there. Which she did the joke, and I just went, wow, this is your mom. And she goes, you did raise me. I have a sense of humor about things. I'm like, okay, fair enough. It doesn't take anything away. It's just an off-kilter. We're going to find lightness out of the dark, and it's going to be okay.
Good
and that's
approach.
the message.
I like to preach that. I don't want to bring away from memorial and
Certainly.
respect, but I think that's also memorial and respect.
Well, I think so. Every time you close your eyes and you think of somebody,
Yeah.
I was showing you guys stuff at my house, and there is my grandfather's flight gear from when he was a World War II bomber pilot.
No
In a way, I remember him when I was looking at it today,
Yeah.
and it's a positive tribute to me. They're always top of mind, and that's fine.
So real fast, is that started late or is that what we?
That started slightly late,
But-
at around 5 to 6 minutes to
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So in other words, we've prattled on this long about what's some really heavy stuff, and people are like, wow, there's no entertainment value at all here.
No, it is.
Oh.
It is pretty entertaining. Yeah, people find entertainment in different ways, but you know, this is still one of the big forms.
Well, this draws people in sometimes,
Yeah.
or they've checked out already.
Well, yeah. For the two remaining podcast listeners, we can talk about what we did after motorcycles and everything else.
Real briefly, because people have asked me, sometimes I look back, or sometimes this random dude talks. Axel is my producer. Axel goes to Dubisky Career High School. He is an intern. And at Dubisky Career School, he does audiovisual work. And so I tried to plan my podcast around when Axel is here, so that we have a producer, engineer. And that's the random dude that chimes in.
At least there's one professional in the room, so it's good.
Yeah, I pop in once in a while on every podcast, so yeah, I'm to the left of Cole.
Message.
That's right.
Message. So to clarify, I'm going to start doing that a little bit more, because I've had that question. Who's that dude? Okay, so
Cool.
we're recovering.
So there's we are. We've recovered. We have moved down to Houston, started working for Valpak in Houston, moved my family down there, and needed a new hobby. Clearly motorcycles was not it.
Next.
So I heard about an arcade expo in Houston that had a swap meet in the parking lot.
Okay.
That people could, it was a free swap meet, people bring in games. And I knew that if I could just find the Alive pinball like my parents bought in 1978, the yellow pinball, that's all I wanted. I just want to have that because it reminds me, my parents closed in the garage, bought a pool table from a business here in Dallas, bought this Brunswick Alive pinball machine, that it actually was a home model, a 3/4 size pinball machine. You could order it out of the Sears catalog back in the day. And it was a $500 game, no coin door, wasn't a commercial property at all. but we thought we were very cool to have this in 1978, 1979, and another thing to play at. And all part of my parents' strategy of make our house the playhouse.
Yeah.
Make our house the fun house. Well, bring your friends over here and they can hang out. We'll leave you alone. So that's what I went to look for. Ironically, I remember back in 2011, my son and I went. I told him, I'm looking for that. I had a truck. My wife wanted to go to San Antonio, so she took the truck to keep me from buying anything.
Yeah, good job. Wes.
Which I consider a challenge.
Yeah.
So I used to have one of those Dodge Magnums, looked like got a Hemi in it, one of those, looks like an ambulance kind of. You can fit a pinball machine in there, turns out.
Oh,
absolutely
nice.
no problem. Now, they didn't have the game I was looking for, and I remember it was $20 for a ticket to go in. Well, my mindset, my generation, I'm thinking, $20 to go into this room and play all these pinball machines for free? Well, at a quarter a game, I would have to play 80 games of pinball just to break it. Well, pinball machines in the wild are not 25 cents anymore, and my math and metrics is way off nowadays what they're doing. But in my mind, I'm a guy in his 50s. I'm like, my goodness, that's a lot of money just to walk in there. So I looked around, and there was a fellow that in the parking lot had a Charlie's Angels. Well, it used to be a Charlie's Angels pinball machine. It'd probably been 20 years since this thing really looked like anything. The paint's all torn off. It didn't work. The computer boards that run it wouldn't start a game. It would light up, and most of them do light up with just general lighting, but that doesn't mean the game works. And the guy wanted $80 for it. And I figured if my wife took the truck to keep me from buying stuff, this is a $50 joke.
Yeah.
So I talked him down to $50 just so that it would be in the garage, set up on legs, lit up, so that she could go, what are you thinking? And that was my first pinball machine, and I collectively looked around. My stepfather and all got involved with it. And it's amazing. I've been in the hobby for 9 years in pinball, arcade games, some slot machines you've seen, and they're everywhere.
So, how many pinball machines? Now, I know you have other games.
I have other games. Pinball machines that I currently have. Over the last 9 years, I've purchased over 60 and bought and sold.
Yeah.
And some of the games we saw today are pretty nice high-end games.
15 that you currently own.
I currently have 8 of them set up in the house, 9 of them set up in the house that I'm thinking of. There are 5 broken down out in my shed.
Okay.
So, in my backyard. So I currently own 13 pinball games.
Are you working on them yourself?
I do not. I don't. See, I talk for a living. Cole, this is what I do. I have very few marketable skills. I don't know if you'd pick up from this. I'm a bit accident prone. So it's not the best idea for me to mess with stuff that plugs in.
Well, let me ask you this. It's a hobby. Many people lose money on their hobby, and many people gain money on their hobby. Is there a value thing onto this?
There is a value. See, when I first got into it, pinball was waning. There was one company that was still manufacturing new pinball machines.
So it was probably going from the thing, the end of it being a cool thing, to now it's more of a retro.
It's retro, and it's come back. In the last 9 years, a lot of businesses are opening the barcade or the arcade concept free plays, Bishop Cidercade. A lot of these, and none of these existed 11 years or 9 years ago. So they've come into their own as entertaining, and people have a nostalgia. I truly believe everybody has a nostalgia from when they were 15 to 20 years old. And that's why everything comes back 20 years later. In the 70s, American Graffiti and Happy Days and everything from the 50s was nostalgic. In the 80s, we had a fond memory for Woodstock and the Beatles, because that was 20 years ago. In the 90s, one of the popular TV shows was that 70s show, because we had a fond memory. And so it's always about 20 years back. So for you probably love the stuff from the late 90s, early 2000s. That's your wheelhouse.
No doubt,
And so I'm 53 now, so I've been in this since I was 44. And guys like me are now coming into, we've got a little discretionary income.
Yeah, right.
So we can afford
nest.
we have a man cave. We don't go out anymore. We don't go out to the bars. And So we have set up a place with a recliner and the big TV and
hobbies
and hobbies to have. So we're like, it'd be cool if I just had the old Tron.
Yeah.
I remember playing. And we remember 30 years ago we were fabulous at these games.
Yeah.
We weren't, but
Killer.
nostalgic. We remember that
Man,
we
I used to light that machine
perhaps the best Donkey Kong player ever, at least in your mind. That's what you remember.
Yeah.
And so I got into this. Now I'm a sales guy. I enjoy the buying and selling process of this. I enjoy the hunt. I have a pickup truck that I use to go grab them. And when you learn the skill sets of how to break them down, how to move them safely, then it's pretty easy, because some of these things have been sitting in the back of people's houses for 20 years.
Yeah.
They broke. They're worth nothing. So I work a network of friends who know about this stuff for repairs, things like that, and maybe I go pick up a game and move it for them.
Yeah, well, and it sounds like your acquisition of them is a garage sale type.
I literally bought the Centipede that you saw in my garage for $50.
Yeah, and then Free Play may pay you, and I'm just generally speaking, they may pay you 3 or 4 times that.
Retail value on a Centipede's $800.
Right.
And there are book values on these, that they're cleaned up, what kind of condition, things like that. You can get nice ones that go for a couple thousand. I've bought, fixed up, made them work, got somebody to help me get them work, and sold, and bought nicer and nicer games as we go. And the newer games require less. Pinball machines are basically chaos experiments under glass.
Yeah.
It's a metal ball smashing into rubber, wood, and plastic.
Yeah.
Going wherever, whenever, and there are electricity and coils firing things off, and it's chaos. And you're using flippers to fire it up there and hit targets, and it's pretty fun. They're going to break. They're designed to break, but they, for the most part, they were commercial money makers that were designed to be put in the arcades.
Yeah.
And they call them operators, the guys that would operate these gaming companies that would go out and put the old arcades in a laundromat or a bowling alley, and they'd put 2 or 3 pinball machines out there. And the old operators, they looked at them as a revenue stream.
No doubt.
I'm going to pay $3,000-$4,000 for this game, and I'm going to put it in service, and it'll generate $2,000 a year. So after 2 years, I've made my money, or whatever your math is. If I need to make double the investment, and then I'm taking it out of service and selling it used because it's no longer cool and popular.
Yeah.
Well, now you got a bunch of old guys like me. They're like, but I remember.
Yeah.
I remember after I worked for Six Flags as a costume character briefly over in Arlington, I was Chuck E. Cheese at Fielder and 303.
Okay.
And no, I didn't work at I was Chuck E. Cheese. I wore the costume. I was the giant rat.
You were Chuck.
I was Chuck in 1983 and 84. And I remember at that time, Michael Jackson's Thriller is the popular music, and it's dominant. MTV is a new thing, and it's out. And the Atari Star Wars, the old with the vector graphics, Red 5 standing by, was a game. And it was cool because even wearing the Chuck E. Cheese costume, I had to look through a mesh through the eyes to see this thing. I could see it crystal clear. I couldn't see a lot of other games through the mask, but I could see the Star Wars because of the lighting of it. And the control module on that, you're basically just a control yoke of fire and twist. And I could do that with fur gloves on as a giant rat. So I had a nostalgic memory for 1983. I was 17 and played this game. And when you're 50 years old and somebody says, hey, would you like one of these? Yeah.
Yep. Yes, please.
Sometimes I won't even play all these games.
Shut up, take my money.
Yeah, done. I got a truck and back it up and let's go. And there's a joy of the hunt. There's a joy of seeing people. You guys came over today and played some games, and it's fun seeing you guys play. Where it's like, wow.
I was gonna say, the first game that I played, I was just like, okay, it gets kind of cool. You just want to log on and look at it. The second time, I was like, tapping those pinball. And then the third time, I'm just like, I'm laser focused, trying to get. Of course, I still stink at it, but I'm just like trying my best to get that ball hit. And
There's a gentleman that I knew down in Houston, and he'd been into this since the 70s. And he got into pinball and stuff because he was into jukeboxes.
Yeah.
And at a time, these operators would have a jukebox, but there'd be 3 pinball machines in front of it. So I'll make you a deal on the jukebox.
Yeah.
But you got to get these old electromechanical 1950s pinball machines out of the way. So he has hundreds of them. But every game I ever asked him about, he goes, yeah, that's a fun game.
Yeah.
And his name's Dan Ferguson. He just recently passed. And Dan was a great guy because, you know what? They're all games. They're all designed to be fun. I mean, different people might enjoy different things or different aspects. There's themes on these games that, I mean, the pinball machines in my garage, I have Munsters and Batman and Star Wars, and if you have an affiliation with that, one of them plays Jar Jar Binks, then you know, if you hate Jar Jar, you don't want to play that game.
Yeah, and of course, with Batman has been one of those constant figures. I remember thinking how Michael Keaton, Jack Nicklaus, and I thought that would never be topped. And when they did a few of the other characters, I thought, well, Michael Keaton, Jack Nicklaus will never be topped. And the point is about the constant of Batman.
Well,
and then Heath Ledger.
Heath Ledger
And
is
what's
Joker.
the guy's name?
Joaquin Phoenix
No.
just won the Oscar for the Joker two
Oh.
nights ago.
Well, okay, and that as well. But I'm talking about the Batman. The Batman.
Christian Bale.
Bale, yeah.
Christian Bale's version of and those movies.
Took 20 years.
And it's funny because it's generational.
Yeah.
You're younger than me, so you start with the 1989 Michael Keaton, Jack Nicholson. I was born when Batman 66 came out, 1966, and it was in Technicolor.
Oh,
and it was a TV show that had pow and piff and all of this stuff, and it became kind of a phenomenon. People, the celebrities of the day, wanted to be on. Liberace and Milton Berle did guest shots on this show, and there was the famous, Cesar Romero was the Joker, and Adam West and Burt Ward as Robin.
Yeah.
And this was the thing. So generationally, those of us who in the 70s, that was on syndication. You know what? That was on at 3:30 when we got home from school.
Perfect.
It was always on, and you'd have to follow it because it was always 2-part serial. Same bat time, same bat. So I remember as an adult when the 1989 one came out, going, this is very different. This is not the comedy bow piff, goofiness of Adam West. This guy actually looks like he could hurt somebody. This is serious. Oh, the Joker guy looked crazy. That's really a different thing, but it's tied together. That's one of the comics were part of our growing up. And
so I wonder, like Val Kilmer and maybe one other Batman in between.
You had Michael Keaton in 1989. Val Kilmer did one.
Oh, George Clooney.
George Clooney famously did Batman and Robin with the nipples on the suit.
Yeah.
She had Joel Silver. He knows that, and see, generally, that happened 20 years before Axel was born, but he remembers.
Dude, the bat nipples, the bat crotch, and the bat credit card. I remember everything on that.
When was George Clooney Batman? What years?
I think it was.
I believe it was 1997. Now you fact check me to see if I'm right, because I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger played Mr. Freeze.
Yeah.
And you had villains like, what you got? Get there yet?
No.
It's interesting that they come out. So that was Batman and Robin, the introduction of Batgirl.
June 20, 1997.
You can see.
See, interestingly enough, when you go and bought these theater tickets for first run, I remember a lot of that stuff that happened. I have a coworker who's 40 years old that is so excited about the new Top Gun coming out.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, we got to go see that. I took my first wife to see that in the theaters. I'm like, wait a second, that was 1986, man. I don't think you were born in 1986.
Man, we did I did Super Bowl notes, commercials, key plays, halftime show for our first guest, Josh Moody.
Right.
We were going to do a Super Bowl deal, and his wife's pregnant. She got sick, and it's past now.
The timing is.
But I watched every second for like 3 or 4 hours, making notes, getting pumped up for it.
So, what were your top 2 commercials in the Super Bowl?
So I think I really, what won me was Sam Elliott's
The Western with Little Nas X.
Yeah, when his mustache did the role, I think that won it for me.
Okay.
I'd probably have to think a little bit more about the others.
One I thought was really funny was the product I don't care much about, but the Hyundai Sonata with Smart Park.
Yeah, Smart Park.
And it's Smart Park, and they have the celebrities who all have ties to the Boston area, and you can tell that these actors over the years have worked so hard to eliminate their Boston accents.
Yeah.
But you've got John Krasinski, who was Jim on The Office, and is now
Pennsylvania.
Jack Ryan on it. He is actually from the Boston area. And
The
you
Saturday
have
Night
Chris
Live girl.
Evans. Yeah, you have, is that Maya Rudolph, I believe?
She might have been.
No,
I
but
was
I
talking
know who.
about that.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about. She played Debbie Downer in all of the things. But she's from the Boston area, and Chris Evans, Captain America,
Yeah.
and they're all from the Boston area. So you know they basically told them just to lean into that accent a little bit. Just you know the accent. You know the accent you worked so hard to lose.
Debbie Downer.
And you know
Rachel Dratch.
Rachel Dratch, that's
Yeah.
right. And they leaned into that, and it was funny because, and they even included the big spoiler, Big Poppy at the end here.
Yeah. Okay.
And even with their Boston accent, we're sorry, your bigness,
So I
which is
have
a great punchline.
I have a few notes that I remember since we're going down that road. Let's one, I noticed for the first time, and let me say the last couple of Super Bowls, I was just at the party.
Okay.
I watched a little bit. I cut the cable a few years ago. Unfortunately, that meant sports as well. I'm trying to get back into it, but anyway, I watched it this time. The multiple product commercial. Did you
The
notice
Procter
that?
and Gamble with
No, maybe it
Bounty
was-
Quicker Picker Upper with Oil of Olay, which is part of their
Old Spice.
Old Spice, the guy on the horse
Yeah,
that
they did.
and it's all owned by the same parent company. It's
And that's-
all P&G
that
products.
makes more sense. That P&G advertised
Multiple consumer goods, but it's interesting because that's the first time I've ever seen this.
And if they're not competing products, it's a genius idea.
But in the past, yeah, you'd have different marketing budgets and different products, which we use these products and we may buy 10 different products, but ultimately it's all
All the
manufactured
same.
by the same parent company.
Yeah.
So it's smart marketing that they actually said, okay, look, if we're going to pay millions of dollars for
Yeah.
a 30-second or a 1-minute
Let's get 'em all
spot,
in
let's
there.
get them all up here, and you can see. Because at one point they did one commercial for a Oil of Olay product with the rockets and the girls in space,
Yeah.
for lady astronauts, and they had Busy Phillips, the blonde actress, in that. Well, then she's in a throwaway scene in that same multi-product commercial
Yeah.
with Oil of Olay products in another room, and it's like, oh yeah, it all kind of ties together. The other thing I thought was interesting is the tied spot on the guy's shirt.
Yeah. The continuation.
That continued and worked in the trailer for the new Wonder Woman 84
Yeah.
coming out. And you've got the actress playing Wonder Woman, and it looks like a scene in a mall from the 80s, and all of a sudden here comes the guy
Yeah.
with the tie commercial with the spot on his shirt, and it's like, oh no, so this isn't even, wait, they just
this
tricked me
isn't-
here. This is not even,
And then at the end, he was old and he had his shirt.
finally got his shirt clean,
So-
and I think somebody touched it and got him dirty.
Do you think that this was maybe the NFL, or somebody came along, or maybe the channel, and said, let's approach this different instead of just somebody producing? Here's my commercial. Here's my $1 million commercial.
I honestly think that the economies of scale have gotten so large on these
Yeah.
commercials that the viability, because it was $4.5 to $5.5 million for 30 seconds on it, and it's over the years a real toss of the dice whether it's a good game,
Yeah,
whether you lose people.
I'm glad we're going on. The typical American Budweiser, that was pretty good.
Right.
I don't remember specifics, but I remember thinking, oh, that was pretty good the way.
I'm kind of glad we're talking about entertainment now. I feel an obligation for those that stuck with us through the first part
For
of
the
this
first-
podcast that are like, okay, it does pick up, guys.
And then, well, a lot of my ideal design on a podcast is 2 or 3 hours.
Oh,
But right now, I don't want to scare people off.
Especially you guys watching. He's
Yeah.
kidding.
Uh.
Axel will never let that happen.
So what I thought, I never noticed before the political ad of Trump, and then one of the other guys did political ads.
And that is
that
an
a new
entry.
thing?
That is new because it was prohibitive previously for political spots to run in that high dollar real estate of the Super Bowl.
Wow.
But the world has evolved to some very expensive campaigns and
Yeah.
very expensive outreach and eyeballs and a lot of mass market. I mean, Donald Trump has parlayed his celebrity from TV shows
Yeah.
and being
Well,
a
he's-
brand.
Yeah,
He was a brand in the 80s and 90s, and whatever your political thoughts on him is fine.
yeah.
But he has taken that to where some people know him as a brand name. Mike Bloomberg is an extremely wealthy billionaire. So now it becomes, if I put this spot out here, the people who aren't going to investigate and aren't going to really drill down, but get inundated with
Yeah,
that.
they get the idea. So,
I mean, I'll tell you the story about the Cowboy Stadium over in Arlington.
Yeah.
I was involved in the steering committee for that back in 2004. And we knew, I'm sorry, I have to mute him because it's driving Axel crazy that he hears that annoying little buzz out there. And no, it's not your equipment, it's my phone. I was involved back in 2004. There was a push for the Arlington citizens to vote for a sales tax for what has become AT&T Stadium.
okay.
But they knew they couldn't do this in a municipal election in May. They knew that they needed to do it in a general election, a general presidential that had the most turnout,
Really?
the most people voting, because if you do it in May, the voter turnout is so small.
Well,
And it skews to be a little older, more conservative crowd, and they wanted to reach the most Joe football fans.
wow.
And it literally came down, and I had a lot of fun working on that. And when you're spending Jerry Jones money, it can be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But it came down to them winning a game, and interesting enough, against the Detroit Lions on Halloween,
Okay.
because the election was 2 days later. And I remember a consultant telling me the election was 2 days later, and the motion passed for the sales tax to build this stadium, 58 to 42, which was a landslide
After a win.
after a win. And they said, had the Cowboys lost last Sunday, I'm not sure
That would've
you'd have
gone
had a
that way.
bunch of Joe Sixpacks really irritated with the Cowboys that might have voted the other way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's interesting how it comes down. But that was interesting that things have changed how we put these brands out. And
Yeah.
the political thing, we'll see that.
Iowa caucus was probably starting about that time, right?
Iowa caucus was the next night.
Yeah. So
And-
I mean, it almost makes sense.
And then the New Hampshire primaries was 8 days later.
Yeah.
And
And
on we go with the circus.
And we're in full swing now.
Now it will go. So
Well, and I had an experience running a campaign, and I'll tell you, a lot of it is you have to have a marketing aspect. You have to produce material, and you have to distribute it, and that's the same thing in marketing your business and marketing your product,
absolutely.
just like Valpak. And so that's a large skill. It's a major skill set when doing a campaign.
it's reaching people so that you're top of mind.
Yeah.
You know personally. You have to know these people. And a lot of voters vote for who they talked to, heard speak, or heard from last.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And
Unless you're
especially
already-
in local elections. I mean, I'm not talking about the presidential and some of the the statewide stuff, but the guy that you came to your door and you actually know and say, yeah, I played basketball with that guy. I like him. He goes to my church.
Yeah.
I'm going to vote for that guy, and I support him, and that's where you get the support. And I think that's, obviously on a national level, they can't do that. So
and you're able to, all you can do is just advertise. It's
yeah,
not a coupon.
insurance,
So it's a little
you're
bit-
got regulations with you. It's interesting because sometimes we'll have political ads run. Because I know for the small municipals, depending on where your geography is, now I understand people will do postcards and mail them out
Yeah,
to
Areas.
registered voters.
yeah.
Because that makes sense. Why send something to somebody who's not registered? They're not
Everybody
going to vote for you.
else.
They've changed how,
Yeah.
how the messaging comes
Good
out.
thing is, I think they did at least one Democrat, one Republican. So it
They
wasn't
did. So as
one-sided.
far as the partisan thing, but I did think it was interesting that with budgets, the P&G, and the packaged goods,
Ooh.
where the Bounty Man, I love the Bounty Man, firing the towels out
Yeah.
and Old Spice and all that together. Budweiser's always good for a nice.
Yeah. You know what's kind of
Tearjerker.
creepy was Jason Momoa is removing his muscles
But funny.
and hair. Oh, it's
But
hilarious.
funny because everybody looks at the big muscle bound Hollywood stars like, yeah, he's probably not even like that.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like that. So to have him do some self-deprecating humor, people like.
Really like the intro, America the Beautiful. That was Grammy Award winner. And I don't know, but then Demi Lovato
Right.
did the national anthem.
Yeah, national anthem.
That was pretty good. The
He's so excited.
forgive my lack of knowledge. I thought Shakira and J-Lo were great.
I think we live in a world now that's changed. I have a background of working in the newspaper business, but I was the advertising guy.
Yeah.
Nobody cared what I said. I was about reaching an audience.
Yeah.
But I have respect for news gathering organizations and how they went about, the journalists and how they went about doing, and that's changed. Nobody cares who won the ball game tomorrow.
Nope.
They want to know tonight. They can find it on their phone. We have social medias and Snapchats and Instagrams and Facebooks and everything else, and everybody has become a frustrated reporter wanting to be the first to get the news out, or let me give you my opinion on whatever comment, whether it's political or it's the Super Bowl halftime. Everybody gives it out as if it has the weight and gravity of, you need to hear my opinion.
Yeah.
Not that we care.
Shock factor.
But it's funny because people will comment and then they fight back and forth on Facebook. And we have personal friends who are like, yeah, I totally don't agree with you, so I'm just not going to like or comment and try to avoid those conversations. But I think it's interesting. People, in an eagerness to be first, and an eagerness to, breaking news, these events going on, Don Knotts just died. Well, he died in 2004, but you know,
got a bunch of clicks.
You know, a couple weeks ago, you know, I think it was last week, Kirk Douglas passed. And people were very shocked because the man was 103 and snatched out at the, you know, beginning there at 100 of what? Did he die in a, you know, skateboarding accident? For crying out loud, the man was 103. He had a good life. We got great memories.
That sounds really bad, but I actually was like, I thought he already died.
Well, and it's so funny with social media, people just want to click and forward stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I read this. There's very little vetting that goes into, so I have some respect for the journalist I worked for in my newspaper days. And I didn't. I wore my suit and tie, and I had all the swagger in the world that, you know, they don't make the money off 50 cents for the newspaper. They make the money off the ad revenue I'm bringing in. So I'm the reason the newspaper exists. And my opinion changed twice. My opinion changed Labor Day weekend in 1996 as we came back from an event and we were headed out to Lake Texoma. And it was Saturday night, and the news started to break that Princess Diana, recently divorced, was in an accident in Paris.
Oh, wow.
And as the news reports continued to pour in, it was very interesting that, okay, it was a broken arm, and then it got worse, and it got worse. Well, working in the newspaper business, I knew that the Sunday paper started printing at midnight.
Yeah.
So they needed to go. They have to get this thing out by 7 a.m., so they're going to start the presses. And I don't think in Paris they announced our time, 1 o'clock, that she passed.
Right.
We got up in the morning to head out to Lake Texoma where people were spending the holiday weekend on the boat. And all these people on these big boats are standing. They got the docks with their, you know, picnic tables behind it. But I grabbed the paper out of our front yard and threw it in the car with me. Brought it up. There was 8 pages of coverage on Princess Di.
No way.
A little bit of news coverage on the accident, but a lot of stuff. And it was so interesting to see these people on that holiday weekend coming off their boats in their, you know, robes, coffee in hand, and all clamoring around reading the paper because this was bringing them the news. And that was impressive. And then, because that news hadn't reached them any other way.
No.
The other was obviously September 11th. And
Yeah.
in the Star Telegram newsroom, there were 3 big, well, I'm the guy in the suit. And I don't understand what the guys in the t-shirts and jeans do for a living all day. But by golly, I'm here with my ag contract. So you can stay employed. You're welcome.
Yeah.
You know, I am all about arrogance and swagger and a terrible individual. And on 9/11, when we first got reports that the first jet hit and then the second jet hit the Twin Towers and that they're shutting down, the planes are sitting down everywhere. I remember going up to the 3rd floor where they had the TV coverage on all 3 networks. And the director of HR is standing next to me, and I just looked at him, and it is a hive of activity. And all those flaky guys in sandals and jeans and t-shirts are running around and tearing paper and writing this and doing things. And I said, what do we do? And he goes, nothing.
Yeah.
We stay out of the way. This is what they do and why it's important. We just let them, they're bringing the news to the people. This is what they are here for, and nobody really cares about your ads today.
Yeah.
And that's when I had some respect for it. So it's interesting to see 20 years later,
How that.
we just blast stuff out on Facebook and go, oh yeah, I was wrong.
Oh yeah, here you go. Yeah.
Yeah, this happened. And you know, it's like, okay, with a little respect, let's make sure we're not firing out, hey,
Yeah.
there's an active shooter at the college campus. Well, be careful with that, because there's a lot of parents that will climb over mountains to go get their kids that are at that college campus if you don't have all the story.
So part of what I want to get into in this podcast, the learn part of it, learn, inspire, teach, entertain, is psychology. And unfortunately, many of us subscribe to something that does just that regularly. Like they put out that blurb, and it's just written well enough to where you almost know it's just an opinion or it's not the exact fact, because that's what we want to hear. And that's called confirmation bias. It's a psychology term. So when you and I, let's just say Democrat, Republican, who cares who's who, can read the same article and take two completely different views on that article, because going into it we already knew what we were looking for. And so when politics comes up, it's all opinion based, and we want to confirm our own opinions and thoughts. And so that's where this big rift comes from. And it's very interesting. For me to describe that's tough, but to have a psychologist on here who could explain to folks what that means.
Well, you gravitate towards like-minded people.
Yeah.
And with social media, we now see people and they'll share the post. And if you look at the source, it's like, well, of course they're going to swing heavily right or swing heavily left. They're very much aligned with this person's beliefs. I'm kind of blessed. When I was at South Grand Prairie High School, I had a teacher who was a longtime teacher, Susan Crocker at the time. She's Susan Gentry, and you know Susan very well. She was my teacher back in the day.
Cool.
She was very young, but she was my teacher, and she was theater teacher. In my day, she taught us debate.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And we went and competed in the speech and debate tournaments, and she taught us the gift of being pro or con any issue, and being able to detach yourself from your personal opinion, which is tough to do when you're 16.
Good. Yeah, but I bet.
And being able to argue
Tough to
for
do,
or
period.
against an issue. We talked about consumer goods and the mandatory seat belts, and there was another side of this why we don't need mandatory seat belts. And I remember one of the arguments was crafted around, well, if we have mandatory seat belts, too many people are going to live too long, and that'll cause overpopulation. So we need to thin the herd a little bit, which is a really random argument, but I think it helped me going forward to be able to say, obviously, I have my opinion on certain issues, politically and otherwise, and what is right, what is wrong, and the way I would position it, but it helps you to respect, well, these other, there's another way to look at it.
Perspective.
And, that goes back to she was Miss Crocker back in the day for me, and always will be, and it drives her crazy
No,
because
she
she
is.
is. But
Gaynor
she was
now, right?
Gaynor, Susan Gaynor. And her daughter's Gentry, and that was her maiden name. And Susan Gaynor was a fabulous teacher. There's always 2 or 3 that made a mark, and she was was one of mine.
That's good to hear. I actually was lucky enough to have a leadership Grand Prairie class with her, and she knew me because my brother took her class. I didn't, and so we just immediately clicked. Being at the school district, we became friends. And even when she retired,
I was there for the retirement
cool.
at this. I didn't know you at the time.
I
It's
don't-
ironic.
I can't say I went to the retirement, but I just knew,
It was important to me because that's one of those that she took time with a nerdy. I mean, she was my teacher in 7th and 8th grade at Jackson Middle School, and then as I transferred to South Grand Prairie, she moved over to South. So
quality educator. She
was
mainly
my
because
teacher.
She cared.
she was my mentor, my teacher for 4 years, all through, and she was one of the ones that taught me to think, taught me to have an opinion. And it's interesting, you talk about the bias, and it's very common that you'll read, okay, well, yeah, obviously, now look at the source. This is a ultra-conservative right-wing, we love Trump, he's never said a bad word. He never, if you don't like, we'd all wish he'd put down the Twitter. Sometimes, if we're mean people, and regardless of your my wife and I don't have political conversations because I'm not sure we always see eye to eye, and that's okay. But a respect for other people's opinions is okay too, and understanding where other people come from. And if you can do it over seatbelts and not wanting too many people to live, because that'll cause a food shortage.
And that's why I like to point that out, and the importance of learning that and
Right.
educating yourself on what confirmation bias is. Because when we learn and know that, we may still go back and forth on the opinion, but we'll realize that we're inherently doing something, right? That doesn't mean we dislike each other.
Right.
We've just already got our bases set, and we're just having a simple opinion. Whereas if you don't know that, you're the devil because you don't agree with me.
Yeah.
Right?
How could you have an opposite opinion? And that's where, as information and social media has changed everything. 15 years ago, we didn't know, iPhones did not exist.
At all.
You didn't look stuff up. We didn't have the rapid where Axel can look up this fact check and see if we're just making stuff
Yeah,
up about
we're
what
making
year
stuff
the
up.
Batman and Robin movie came out. You didn't have those resources. Now we are armchair authoritarians on everything.
Yeah. Well, I am.
And we can find, well, and that's,
Yeah.
you know, it's a
We're
great
all-
niche for you. But the reality is, and you can find somebody online that has written a story, and it all looks like
Yeah.
old school, what we grew up was news, but it has the bias. And it's interesting to go, okay, consider the source. And
I encourage you to read all the biased stuff you want, as long as you know that it is in fact biased, right? Don't take it, don't fool yourself into thinking this is fair, simple news. Just as long as you know what you're prescribing to, I'm okay with you doing it. Just don't be fooled by it.
well, you went to UTA just like I did, just
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
way different times, right?
Sure.
And but when I went, I took a logic course, and it was all the fallacy of, because he's doing this and she's doing this, they must be the same. And these are simple fallacies of logic that people, being able to talk and discuss issues is far more important than just forwarding the Facebook post you saw somebody put out there because,
Yeah.
by the way, Don Knotts still dead.
Yeah.
Just in case anybody's wondering.
Well, hey, we'll get close to wrapping this up.
Cool.
I want to thank you very much for showing me the man cave. I know Axel just pumped his fist. I can see him off the corner of my eye.
It's a lot of fun. Those of you that know me or see me in the community, I'm happy to
Yeah.
let me know you're coming, and so I can, you know, clean up the dog hair and do
Yeah,
whatever
yeah.
I got to do. And
It was definitely a treat. We
it's
got a lot of
interesting.
photos.
People have different hobbies and different stuff. And here's a hobby that, you know, obviously I had a motorcycle hobby, and
Yeah.
I've been into this hobby for 9 years, and to this date, knock on wood, I have not fallen off a pinball machine. So far so good.
Good job, Barry. Good job, man. Thanks again for coming on.
My pleasure.
We'll do this again soon.
Absolutely.
See you, man.